And welcome, College Football Nation, to Season 5. That's right, Season 5 of Krown Countdown U, Canada's place for college football. On this edition of the show, we will preview the Ontario Conference, that's the OUA, and the Canada West. And the man to lead us off back for season number 4 is to my right, Ryan Sullivan. Where do we get this season started, Mr. Sullivan?
University football is back in Canada, and on top of that, to make things even sweeter, non-conference preseason ball is back on the gridiron. It's hard to get a lot of people excited about exhibition games, mind you. However, it's not hard to get people excited about a team that they have not seen in a heck of a long time. It's interesting. It's interlocking. We'll kick things off in Montreal, where Queens took to the road to face off against Concordia. Mickey Donovan and the Stingers looking for a second consecutive year with a preseason win over the Gales. The defense stepped up for Donovan in a big way. Sam Narkaj with the first of his 3 sacks on the day. Former Saskatchewan Huskies pivot Jelani Gilbert-Nora, now a Stinger, scores a major with this goal line plunge. That capped off a 12-play, 75-yard drive, making the score 16-12 for Queens. Stingers down by 3 late in the 4th. Pivot Trent Miller hit rookie receiver James Ahayan for a game-winning major. Concordia takes the win over Queens by 3. To Saskatoon we go. College Hall of Fame game at Griffiths. Drew Burko tossed a pair of touchdowns, including this 63-yard beauty catch and run from Mitch Hillis. He finished the game with 9 receptions for 187 yards and 2 scores. No rust from the summer on this guy. Huskies take a bite out of the Jayhawks, taking this one by 23. 2 national powerhouses locked horns in Manitoba. The Bisons held as much as a 16-point lead in the second half, but Guelph clawed back with 2 pick-sixes, including this 40-yarder from Elijah Walker that gave the Griffins the lead. But in the dying seconds of this game, the Herd down by 3. Ryan Jones hits this gimme from 22 yards out. This one ends in a tie, but this Bisons fan doesn't seem to mind. Back to Montreal, it's the 154th meeting between U of T and McGill. Jim Mullin's seen all of them. Varsity Blues 5th-year QB Simon Nassar and receiver Boris Isaacov were huge on the day for Toronto. Here the two connect for a 31-yard major that put the Blues well out in front. Toronto cruising to a 36-3 win. Here's the rest of the scores from around non-conference exhibition play. The reigning Vanier Cup champs flexed their muscles, tuning the GGs by 33, while Carleton got 2 touchdowns from Dexter Brown in a 16-12 win over the Ver et Or of Sherbrooke. All right, now that we've got the exhibition play out of the way, let's get you ready for the real deal, the season previews. Let's start in the Canada West. Longtime coaches switching spots, leaving posts, former NCAA Canucks heading north of the border, and once snake-bit teams becoming competitive once again. You could say the C-Dub is now one of the more even-tiered conferences in the nation. If you've been out of town for a while, sit back, put those feet up, and relax. We're going to get you up to date on one of the most exciting conferences in the country, the Canada West. All right, first off, what about the defending champion Manitoba Bisons? The word with the Herd is change, especially on the offensive side in some key positions. Gone are quarterback Jordan Yance, running back Keenan LaFrance to the Red Blacks, and 4-time all-conference receiver Nick Dembski to the Riders, leading pass catcher Matt Sawyer, and he's also graduated. The Chocolate Brown and Prairie Gold will rely on defense. D-lineman David Onyemata is a potential first-round CFL pick, and DB Jaden McCoy, well, he just makes plays. Redshirt sophomore QB Teo Dizar has the ability to be an elite pivot in the conference. Brian Doby will give Dizar the keys to the family car. Calgary went down for the count in 2014, but expect the Dinos to be ready for the rematch. Calgary returns with a strong core led by Canada West MVP and Heck Crichton award-winning quarterback Andrew Buckley. Also returning offensively are all-Canadians Mercer Timmis and Brett Blasco. Wayne Harris has been around the Dinos for over 2 decades as an assistant. Now he takes ownership over from Blake Nill as head coach. Calgary's house is built on a solid foundation. All that is needed for the turnkey T-Rexes is a little fine-tuning, and Harris could snag his second Vanier Cup ring, this time as the head boss.
Back to the panel we go as we break this thing down 2 by 2. This is former Gale and Bird sophomore panelist, don't want to put a jinx on you, Gord Randall, and Vanier Cup champion quarterback and former coach Shawn Olson. Let's get right to it, Gord. We know what Manitoba loses in terms of defense and offense. Can that core of rookie, second, and third-year guys really take it to the next step?
I'd like to focus on what Manitoba brings back on the defensive side of the ball in particular. And that back seven comes back more or less intact. They lose a couple bodies. Jaden McCoy is the big, sexy name back there. But you've also got the worker bees, your Fongs, your Testchucks, your Lalamas, your Harrisons. It's going to be a really good unit back there. Up front on the defensive side, a guy I've been waiting for 2 years to finally break out. Got a ton of potential. David Onyemata should be able to anchor the middle of that defensive front and keep it a strong side of the ball. On the offensive side, Teo Dizar, a very talented guy, but the question is, who are his weapons going to be? He loses all the big names, the LaFrances, the Dembskis. He's got to turn over his skill weapons, but fortunately, he's got a veteran offensive line in front of him, anchored by McKay and Gamblin, that should help him find traction early.
Sean, we saw who Calgary brings back, but they don't lose too many to graduation, do they? This is a healthy squad.
No, they're returning a lot of really talented young players. The big change is going to be in their culture. Anytime you lose a coach like Blake Nill, who has been obviously a consummate winner everywhere he's gone, you're going to have some challenges, even if you're replacing him with Coach Harris. The big issues I see on the field are going to be with Adam Konar and Jake Hardy being replaced. Jake Hardy was an absolute difference maker on offense. Anytime they needed a big play, he was the guy that they seemed to go to. And Adam Konar, I'll tell you from personal experience, he played for us as a freshman. And last year, we often sent 3-4 linemen to get him on any specific run play, and we could not do it. He will be missed sorely.
To the Wheatland we go.
November is not to remember if you are a Saskatchewan Husky. 1-8 in their last 9 playoff games, and whoops, yeah, they did it again. Up by 19 over Manitoba in the third quarter at Griffiths, the Prairie Dogs gave up 22 unanswered points in a meltdown of epic proportions. It is up to senior QB Drew Burko to find the flash of his freshman year. Sophomore receiver Mitch Hillis will look to lead an offense that ranked 5th in the conference last season. Let's stop the doggy downers, as there's a puppy upper on defense. Who's writing this stuff? With grad transfer DL Donovan Dale from UBC. He was the conference top lineman in 2014. After more than 40 years with the Regina Rams football program, 31 of those as the head coach, Frank McChrystal is gone, and in is Mike Gibson. Between the lines, Addison Richards, yeah, he's gone. He's a Blue Bomber now, while quarterback Cayman Shutter has graduated. Redshirt sophomore Noah Picton takes the reins full-time at quarterback, which bodes well for Gibson. Picton stepped in for an injured Shutter and led the West in passing yards per game. There will be a running game in the Queen City as well, and it will go by the name of Atlee Simon.
Sean, you've coached him. You've seen what he can do on the D-line. But what does Donovan Dale specifically bring to a Saskatchewan Huskies front seven?
Well, I'll tell you this, Donovan Dale is one of the most hardworking and integral parts of our defense over the last couple of years. He will absolutely turn around that defensive front from the Saskatchewan Huskies. He has been probably the most disruptive force in the country over the last 2 years as defensive tackle. He was almost unblockable 2 years ago. Last year, he had a little bit of a down year in his own terms, but was still one of the best defensive tackles in the country and reached All-Canadian status. He will be a difference maker for Saskatchewan. The other guy that I think is going to be a huge difference for Saskatchewan is Drew Burko. Going into his 4th year, this is when quarterbacks really come into their own. I'm expecting to see some big things from the Huskies.
Gord, let's take a look down the road in Regina. Mike Gibson, he's an offensive mind. The Regina Rams are a team that loves to go to the air attack, but do we expect to see a little more of Atlee Simon this year at running back?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jim. And the big question with Mike Gibson coming in is he going to stick with that air raid style that Frank McChrystal really made his signature there, or is he going to move to more of a ground attack? He's got lots of options to choose from. You already mentioned Atlee Simon. Noah Picton is back under center as well. He is an up-and-coming, really, I think he's going to be a great quarterback for them, and they returned 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line. On the offensive side of the ball, I mean, this team can put up a ton of points. On the defensive side of the ball, they've got some issues, though. Tavon Campbell graduates to the CFL. He's no longer back. But the real issues are in the front 7, where they've lost a lot of their big playmakers. They got a couple good young returning linebackers. But this may be a team, and I'm going to say this again when we talk about Alberta, this may be a team where you're seeing a lot of 80, 90, 100-point affairs on Saturday afternoons.
Now to last year's playoff non-combatants.
Alberta broke a dubious losing streak last season, and head coach Chris Morris will look to improve on a year that saw the program win 3 games for the first time since 2010. The Golden Bears have weapons, namely in receivers Jimmy Ralph, who had a breakthrough performance in this year's East-West Bowl, and of course Tyler Henry returns as well. Andre Webster has proved he is one of the conference's best kick returners, leading the C-Dub in yards with 804 last season. The Bears may be out of hibernation and ready for a rampage in this year's playoffs. This has been an offseason unlike any other in the 91 years of football at UBC. The Birds dropped bombs heard all over the country. Blake Mill defects from Calgary. Boom. Then cue Penn State redshirt freshman quarterback transfer Michael O'Connor. Boom again. Then on D, Boise State defensive back Taylor Loeffler into the Bird's nest. Boom 3 times. UBC had the best recruiting class in Canada in 2015, and with high expectations on the point, will we see explosive football or another T-Bird implosion?
Coach Chris Morris has indicated it's a wide open competition at quarterback. The Bears are loaded with weapons, as we saw in that piece. Is no quarterback that's been decided on a real issue for the Alberta Golden Bears?
I don't think it is based on the supporting cast that comes back. I think you may see both Pearson and Kopczynski in the first couple weeks here. Maybe one of the freshmen nuzzles his way in there, but I think it's probably between the 2 returners. But when you have a guy like Tyler Henry on the outside, you have Andre Webster, Ralph, you've got Ed Ilnicki in the backfield. You've got lots of options. Even if your quarterback's struggling on any given week with the quick screen game and just handing the ball off, you do have some options on that Alberta offense. This is another team like the Regina Rams that has a ton of talent on offense and a ton of question marks on defense. And like I said, I expect fireworks pretty much every Saturday from these guys.
First genuine awkward moment on KCU this year. I got to ask the former UBC coach about his former team. We saw about all those players that are being added to the mix for UBC. Certainly impressive. But what about the guys that were already on the shelf before Blake Mill arrived?
Well, I'll tell you, every year, and anytime there's a coaching change, it would be no different in Regina than it is in UBC or even in Calgary. Every coach is going to come in. They're going to try to have their own culture. They're going to try to turn over some players. They're going to find out which players want to do the hard and dirty lifting that is necessary to be a quality football team. I'm sure that's what Blake is doing. And some of those players that are returning are still going to be amazing contributors for the Thunderbirds. You have guys like Marcus Davis and Terrell Davis who will be going into their second year at UBC, and they're going to have a very, very profound impact on what's happening with the Thunderbirds on the football field. And there's a number of players on defense that are going into their 3rd and 4th year that I expect to see be major contributors. But there is going to be some new talent that's in town. It'll be interesting to see how those 2 groups of players come together.
There's always a lot of pressure at UBC, though. Even though there may not be sellout crowds like in Laval, there is always pressure on the head coach, as well as you know. What about the pressure in the first year for this transition for Blake Mill?
I'm not familiar with any of the pressure at UBC. It'll be very interesting to see how things go. A lot of new pieces come together there at UBC. Blake, this is his first time in a big market. He's been in a number of smaller markets, Calgary being the largest at this point, but he's always been successful. He knows exactly what to do to make things happen at that program. It will be very interesting, though, to see what happens behind the scenes. There is a lot of money being poured into that program right now, and some of the donors are all in, and things are always great when things are going well, and it'll be interesting to see what happens if things don't get off to a great start.
When we come back, we will take you to Ontario, where it's all about ponies and beasts. Stick around. Krown Produce secures produce locally and from around the world for Canadian retailers. Krown Produce is also proud to secure sponsorship of university football on Shaw. Krown Produce, supporting Canadian retailers and Canadian amateur football. Welcome back, everyone. The OUA is always broken down into 3 tiers, with 3 of the usual suspects sitting on top in McMaster, Guelph, and Western. But let's begin in the Hammer, where the reigning Yates Cup champs and the Vanier Cup runner-up McMaster Marauders will be hard-pressed to follow up on what was an extremely successful 2014 season. Over to Mr. Sullivan.
After making the Vanier Cup for a 3rd time since 2011, the Marauders fell 1 point shy of winning the title, and now the last of that class of players have moved on. Head coach Stef Patasek will lean hard on a second-team All-Canadian receiver Danny Vandervoort to lead an offense that will have 4th-year pivot and 1st-year starter Asher Hastings at the helm. Lots of turnover on both sides of the ball will certainly be a major obstacle for Mac to overcome this season, but don't expect the Marauders to fall too far in the conference. Guelph and Western round out the top tier in the OUA. Both teams go into 2015 with major changes, and in the case of the Mustangs, some major concerns. The health of quarterback Will Finch is paramount for Western head coach Greg Marshall. Finch battled concussions last season, forcing him to miss the Yates Cup semifinal against Guelph. The team has top receiver Matt Yaren returning, but lose Brian Marshall to graduation. However, the biggest blow is on defense, where the Mustangs lost first-team All-Canadian lineman Darryl Wadd to the Toronto Argonauts. The Griffins, maybe the most jacked since Perry Ceci was catching majors. Laval Rougeayor graduate transfer QB Alex Skinner has the best opportunity to get the starting reins. James Roberts is in the QB mix still to take over for Jazz Lindsay, whose CIS career has come to an end. Meanwhile, head coach Stu Lang won't dress his team up the way he usually likes to after the OUA Fashion Police cracked down on the amount of uniform combos a program can wear during the season, much to the disdain of Lang and uniform lovers nationwide. Regardless of the wardrobe setbacks, look for the Griffins to be a tidy bunch in 2015, especially with Skinner now at the helm.
Now, Western does not play Guelph in the regular season as a glaring and inexcusable error in scheduling by the OUA. That's being said, Shawn Olson. Who do you like between these 2 teams? They could both end up 8-0 because of the way the scheduling breaks out.
That would be a very, very interesting matchup if they did play during the regular season, but it looks like it might end up being in the Yates Cup. These are 2 of the most talented rosters in the country. You have Will Finch and Alex Skinner. Both these guys are big stud quarterbacks. Will has been one of the most impressive guys that I have seen come through the CIS in the last 3 or 4 years. He's a big, strong, mobile quarterback. Had some injury history, but he's got some weapons on offense with Johnson and Johnson at receiver, and they just brought in big Jamal Kett from Simon Fraser, big 6'5", 255-pound target, which will be integrated very nicely into that offense. And then with Guelph, they always seem to find talent, and it'll be interesting to see how Alex's late arrival time into camp will impact his integration into the team. So it's going to make for a pretty talented Yates Cup if they do meet there, that's for sure.
Can McMaster hold on to be a top 3 team in the OUA, Gord Randall?
Well, it's always a big question mark in Canadian football when you turn over your quarterback. Now, the guy they've got stepping in as the heir apparent to Marshall Ferguson is a kid by the name of Asher Hastings, who has tutored for about 3 years under Ferguson already. Sounds like, and I talked to Marshall Ferguson myself, sounds like he's ready to step in and take the reins. Question becomes, what does Coach Stefan Patasek do with him? Does he adjust his offense, make it a little more run-heavy, lean on his big hoss, Wayne Moore, who's coming back, or does he stick to his tendencies and turn it into an air attack as he usually does. On the defensive side of the ball, big question marks in the secondary. They lose Cupido, they lose Surya, they lose Dix, and they lose Ventresca back there. That's a lot of talent to turn over in 1 year, and it'll be interesting to see how they adjust early on.
Okay, Sully, everyone loves an underdog. Tell us about the middle of the pack.
Yes, Jim, it's a little mushy in the middle. The next group of 5, Ottawa, Queens, Carleton, Laurier, and Windsor, who are all looking to break into that top tier. Who is ready to make that jump? The GGs have an experienced QB in Derek Wendell at the controls of the offense, but JP Metris Award winner Ettore Latanzio is not returning to lead the defense now, as he is an Ottawa Red-Black. Queens had a down year in 2014, but will be improved this time around. Despite losing QB Billy McPhee to graduation, the Gales return a strong young offensive line that is now 1 year older. That line will be pivotal for one of the conference's best running backs in Jesse Andrews, who was an OUA second-team All-Star in 2014. Laurier's defense takes a major blow with the loss of defensive back Chris Aki and lineman Esse Marabre Ajufo, who were selected 4th and 5th overall in the CFL draft. Last year, Carleton took 1 step forward, winning the Panda game in very dramatic fashion, only to take 2 steps back after losing to Queens at home late in the season, slamming the door on their playoff hopes. Windsor, however, could tumble out of this tier. The Lancers lose OUA first-team All-Stars QB Austin Kennedy and receiver Evan Pashonik to graduation. Windsor may not have to worry about extra games, though, in 2015.
Bulls and Bears, whose stock is rising out of that middle of the pack, Sean?
Well, I think we're talking about 2 teams in the Ottawa area between Carleton and Ottawa, both young up-and-coming teams. Last year I was a little surprised at how well the U of O did during the regular season. They had some surprising wins, and they seem to be competitive in every single matchup. Carleton's a team that's been building for 3 years. I know they've only played 2, but they've been building that roster for 3 years, and this was their smallest recruiting class, having only 19 commits. So some of those players will start to be maturing, and it will be interesting to see how those 2 teams clash, especially being from the same city.
Mr. Randall, I suppose that this part of the program is brought to you by the Tricolor.
Well, I was originally going to break into a fight song here, but I decided not to at Mr. Mullin's behest. Up in Kingston, the Gales are another team that has questions under center as Billy McPhee graduates. A kid by the name of Austin Geddes appears to be in the driver's seat, but keep your eyes peeled for Matthew Duffy, the transfer from Carleton, who was a highly renowned recruit out of the Ottawa area a couple years ago. Whoever is under center will have some weapons at their disposal, as Jesse Andrews, the big hoss running back there, Doug Corby, and Curtis Carmichael all come back for the Gales offense. They will have some tools. On the defensive side of the ball, watch out for Alan Champagne, the big graduate transfer defensive end from the University of North Carolina. This guy reminds me a lot of Shamari Williams, the transfer from Houston who came in 2009 to Queens and really helped push us over the top as we went to the national title that year.
Oh, we hear the us and the we out of Mr. Randall. Now we have to find out which one of the teams in the bottom get to move out of their parents' basement suite.
Yes, Jim, these 3 teams have felt the joy of underground living for far too long, but they look like they might just be ready to make a move. Toronto has quarterback Simon Nassar back for his 5th season. Lone OUA All-Star receiver Levi Noel also returns. However, outside of Nassar and Noel, depth for the Blues may only be in the standings. Waterloo brought alumnus Chris Bertoya from Western as the new head coach of the Warriors, with hopes that he can turn around a program that has won just 2 games in the last 2 years. The good news for York is Warren Craney's recruiting efforts finally paid off in the form of 5 top-ranked recruits, all moving over from Alberta. The Lions are in the midst of a 12-game losing streak that dates back to September 21st of 2013. Remember that? York would like to find a way to open their Pan Am Game Stadium in an unlikely way with a win.
So, Gord Randall, let's talk about who made the most progressive move out of these 3 teams. I would think, from your perspective, it might be Chris Bertoya and Waterloo.
Well, when you are in the basement in your conference, I think changing over the coaching staff can only be seen as a good thing. And Chris Bertoia, a veteran coach, a very good recruiter, is a great get for Waterloo, I think. He has brought in a 37-person recruiting class to this team. Now, he's basically inheriting a completely empty cupboard. I think they had 3 guys go to East-West Bowl, which is a nice little building block to build on. But he's brought in a ton of bodies, and he's looking like he's investing in a multi-year process here, which is the right move. Another big get for Coach Bertoia is Ryan Peer as offensive coordinator. He's a guy that has some history at Wilfrid Laurier, both as a player and as a coach, and he should be a good get for that offense that has looked somewhat moribund in the last number of years.
Sean, on the surface, it would seem that between Toronto and York, the team that's really serious about making a move up in the 4-1-6 is York. An impressive grab of recruits out of Calgary earlier this year was a pretty big statement.
No, I think Coach Craney has definitely gone on national with his recruiting class this past year. Before, he was focusing a little bit more on the local talent in Toronto, but this year going into Notre Dame High School, a hotbed for the University of Calgary and the Dinos over the last 4 or 5 years, and getting most likely the best player that's been there for the last 3 or 4 years in Colton Hunchak. Quarterback, athlete, very, very fast, very explosive. He was a guy when I was at UBC I was very, very hot on and really was recruiting heavily. He will make an impact there as an 18-year-old, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the other recruits coming out this year will be able to do for the Lions.
Thanks very much for this, guys. Stay tuned. There is more to come on Krown Countdown U. Krown Produce secures produce locally and from around the world for Canadian retailers. Krown Produce is also proud to secure sponsorship of University football on Shaw. Krown Produce, supporting Canadian retailers and Canadian amateur football. That does it for week 1 of Krown Countdown U. Next week we preview Quebec and have all the highlights from week 1 of the OUA. Hey everyone, let's get out to the game.